Okay, so now with that in mind, it gives me a real delight and pleasure to introduce Carole Pertofsky as our final speaker. And Carole, as somebody I've known for a number of years, first met her through, as I recall, through the course. And she is the director of the Stanford Wellness Center, puts on so many great programs and happiness conferences for not only for students but for many, many people who benefit, and brings in finest teachers and programs that are so well respected at Stanford. So it's a really great pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Carole Pertofsky. So please, let's hear from her.
So before I start, I just want to express the biggest gratitude to you, James, for creating this amazing program and awakening joy in so many people. So grateful. Thank you. And to you, Jane, as well. And to you all, I am so honored to be standing before you on this last class of Awakening Joy. And so much joy is in the room, and I'm looking at faces, and in honor of James' request, I don't want to know the score, but it's a big day for joy. So, after James' most beautiful summary, honestly, there really isn't a lot to say. But I'm going to try to synthesize some ideas. And the reason why is that at Stanford, I've always had a tremendous fantasy. And the fantasy has been to be a commencement speaker. And finally, I'm the commencement speaker. Thank you, thank you. May you all have a wonderful future in this bright, beautiful journey of joy ahead of you. So, what I'm hoping to do is not teach you anything new. I really am not. You already have the teachings. And what I'm hoping to do is just give my spin on some of these beautiful lessons that you've been discovering. And so the question is, what qualifies me to do this? And the biggest qualification I have goes back to 2009, and I was sitting in this room right there. So I'd like to begin with a personal story. That year was such a grueling year. I was dealing with a health issue and was really coping with tremendous grief and loss. From 2008 to 2010, I'd lost my parents, I'd lost 2 friends to cancer, and I lost my beloved pets. And if any of you have had this series of events, you know what this is like. My heart was just filled with grief. I say 2009, what else happened? The economy crashed. And like many of you here, I was just filled with anxiety about the future. And I was kind of ricocheting from grief to anxiety and grief to anxiety. And just to give it a little extra dose, I was really on my own case, and my inner critic was just going, that I wasn't able to function at my full capacity. So I was in grief, or I was in anxiety, and I was also my worst self-critic for not being able to carry on with my responsibilities. So this was a really challenging time for me. The other thing that was going on was at work, we were facing the reality of students at Stanford and students across the country who were facing severe and untold mental health crises. Some of those crises resulted in students taking their own lives. And one of these students was a student I was very close to who happened to have been known for her great compassion. And she was selected when the Dalai Lama came to the Stanford campus to be the student ambassador. And she worked herself to the bone. It's amazing what goes on during these visits, making sure that everything went smoothly. And at the end, she was so exhausted, she went home, and to everyone's horror, she took her own life. Her note was, "I cannot live one more day being me." And the Dalai Lama responded with his clarion call that until we learn to find love and compassion for ourselves in our own heart, we cannot practice true compassion. Well, this was quite a tandem of events, and a friend recognized that I needed a little something, and she had enrolled in this really interesting, strange course called Awakening Joy. And in February of 2010, she said, "Enough already. You need to get back on track. You've been grieving. You're anxious. Let's go." I was driving here, and for some reason, I decided I needed a notebook. Does it ever happen? Like you need that fresh new notebook? Here is my notebook. This was the notebook I bought, and it says, "Then swing your window open, the one with the fresh air and good eastern light, and watch for wings, edges, and new beginnings." Well, that night was a night where doors and windows swung open. It was a game changer, and my life changed. I hit the jackpot. I heard James speak. Rick Hansen was the guest speaker, and Patricia Ellsberg ended it with this most beautiful, heart-opening visualization. I'd heard ideas I never heard before. I heard about the brain, and I heard about the negativity bias. And I realized this wasn't me, this was being human. This is how our brains are formed. And here's good news. There's such a thing as neuroplasticity and self-directed brain change. And not only that, but we have a roadmap. There are these beautiful practices that James just summarized that are our path, one stop after another stop after another stop, that actually help us change our brains so we can notice the good, savor the good, take it in, and reconnect with ourselves to that beautiful place of deep inner knowing. That where the pain, where the grief exist, but we could sit comfortably and grieve and also be grateful for the beloveds that were still there. This game changer affected my personal life in very deep ways, but there's also a way in which it completely changed the work I did directing wellness programs. So when you think about health risk issues on college campuses, there's alcohol abuse, and there's sexual assault, there's random, crazy, regretted sexual hookups that are unsafe, and body image problems. You know the drill. We were spending a tremendous amount of energy looking at behavioral solutions to some of these problems. And when I got done with Awakening Joy, it was really clear to me that we were missing the foundation. The foundation was, do we have a clear mind, and do we have an open heart? At that point, I actually knew sitting right here that I had found the answers I was looking for. And at that point, was very fortunate. I teamed up with Fred Luskin, who some of you may know, and we looked at the model at Harvard, and we launched the first happiness course at Stanford. My head is still a little black and blue from banging it against brick walls trying to get someone to sponsor the course, because back then it was amazing, like teaching students to be happy. Well, no, that's not the goal of the psychology department or the biology department or pre-med. We're going to teach you about the brain, not about how the brain might make you happy. We were successful. we got our course established. And as James said, we held biannual conferences, Happiness Within Reach. I love it. Happiness is within reach. Sold out 400 people within 24 hours, students, staff, faculty, community. And went on to create this wellspring of students who knew deep down something was missing. Despite all of their successes, they were lonely. It was so beautifully captured by a student who said to me, I want so much to be happy, but I just don't know how. I want to be happy, but I don't know how. And I really still wonder, and we've done some studies looking at, as a result of taking the course and learning these happiness practices in a guided community, there is a trend where students are drinking less and they're sleeping more. But there's a very clear trend that 20 to 25% of them report that they are considerably less stressed. Now, this is really something when you consider we do the pretest on the first week of the quarter, like, woohoo, just got done with vacation, I'm chill. And then week 10 of the quarter, where everybody's crazy studying, they still see this decline in stress rates. So these practices are so powerful and they are so beautiful. Now, students are coming of age. They believe in this idealized self. They believe that change is just simple. Folks, we are of age. We get it. It's not that easy. It's not that simple. And life is filled with adversity and suffering. But what I'm here to talk about are the challenges that we all are going to face when this beautiful community stops meeting on Tuesday nights, but how to keep the meaning of this Sangha and this community in our hearts. So I'm going to be talking about sustainability. And where I'd like to start is the brain. Then we're going to go on to 3 sustainability practices for our brain that I love. And they are gumption, gratitude and grit, and grace. So, if I may, I'd like to talk about a brain model that's very similar to what Rick Hansen talked about, and is also a model of emotional regulation that has been developed by Dr. Paul Gilbert, who's a British psychologist and the founder of compassion-based therapy. And I love this model. Here it is. So we have an emotional regulation system in our brain. And there are essentially, and again, highly simplified, but it helps us, 3 little gifts that go on in our brain. The red zone. The red zone is primal. It's the first place that the brain evolved. And as you know, our prime directive is safety, survival. This brain is designed to keep us safe and to protect against threat and harm. Fear, anger, disgust, these can be highly emotional responses when we under fear and threat. What ends up getting transmitted through our brain is cortisol and adrenaline. And these are the functions that get us into what you know of as flight, flight, freeze. So we react, a threat comes, we react, we fight, we freeze, we fly, whatever we do. And with animals, when the fear is quieted because the threat is gone, they just chill. They lay down and chill. It's like it never happened. We have faulty wiring. And that fear response just keeps going and going and going. James talked about the critical key of awakening joy is expansiveness. What does fear do? Locks us down. So this is a double-edged sword, our fear response. It protects us, But if it's not regulated, it can have problems because it keeps us constricted and afraid. But what does happen when we relax? The fear is gone and the threat is gone. According to this model, our emotions go in two different directions. A close relative in the sympathetic nervous system, because adrenaline is going, is, voila, the blue system. This is the system that is go get 'em. This is the system that all of us tribally are experiencing tonight with the basketball game going on. It's like pumping through our body. And when we win, there is going to be this huge surge of dopamine throughout the Bay Area. Tribal energy is so amazing, but it's not just tribal energy. This system is the stuff that makes us set goals, makes us want to get out there, makes us want to do, accomplish. We get excited, we get energized. It's a fantastic motivational system. So we're going to call this one the go-get-'em excitement system. And this is one way that we channel our energy, and we love it. The other way we channel our energy when we feel safe and secure is the green system. And this is called, by Paul Gilbert, the affiliative system. This is the part of us that wants to love and be loved. This is the part of us that wants to be cared for and care for. This is the part of us, that gorgeous hormone called oxytocin. It even has its own nickname, the cuddle drug. Our brains love the feeling of these opiates and endorphins and oxytocin all flowing through us. So here are these three basic and highly oversimplified, if any of you are scientists or neuroscientists out there. But it's a model that I want to lean into because any one of these three systems can either lead to great unhappiness and problems or unbelievable joy and exuberance. And so I want to give you a little blessing for each one of these systems. So let's go back to the red zone. When we feel fear, we will. Life is hard. We face adversity. Life gives us challenges. And you know what? We seek our own challenges. Fear is a very natural response. But what we know is that the gift, the blessing for fear, is that we cultivate courage, or what I call gumption. I love that word gumption. It's plucky. It's muscular. It's like the yang that goes with the yin of virtuous life. I want to bless you with having courage. Here's a beautiful quote from Maya Angelou. She says, "One isn't necessarily born with courage. One is born with potential. Without courage, we cannot practice any other virtue with consistency. We can't be kind or true or merciful or generous or honest without deep courage. Fear hijacks our courage." And so how do we, the question is so practical, how do we ignite our courage? Well, one way, when I say gumption or courage, we immediately, my brain goes to the heroes. We think of people like Mahatma Gandhi, or we think of people like Martin Luther King, or Nelson Mandela, or most recently Malala, the 15-year-old girl in Afghanistan who stood up for the rights of girls to be educated and was shot in the head by Al-Qaeda. The interesting thing of this story, kind of as an aside, is that when she was shot by Al-Qaeda, her father was very well known as an educator, and she was airlifted to a very well-known and very well-respected hospital in Oxford. And it was because she was safely in England that she was able to have the influence that she did, not being in Afghanistan. Interesting how karma works. At 17, she was the youngest person ever awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, like you, I love reading these stories, but there is a real lesson here. These amazing heroes play on a very large world stage. And I don't know, maybe you do, I do not. I have a much smaller sphere of influence. And I think the idea of courage is to stand and own and engage with whatever your sphere of influence is, and to find your deepest core values that James mentioned and live in alignment once you discover those core values, and make that commitment that while the seeking joy is correcting, is fighting, is living with our own deep convictions in whatever sphere of influence we have. All of you, every one of you has had this experience of tapping into your own values, and especially when you see no one else is doing it, of being able to stand up and try to contribute goodness to something that you feel attuned with. And to really connect with this, I'd like you to just take a moment and let this blessing of courage sink into you. And think about a time, a recent time, maybe in your community or an organization. Maybe it was with your children or in your neighborhood. Please take a moment and thank yourself for a specific time that you gave the blessing of courage, gumption, to this world. It's so lovely to see everybody thinking about this, because it's kind of a two-way street. It's finding the values that are in us, that are awaiting our discovery, and it's also hearing the call of what needs attending to. And in this way, the character that we can base our foundation for awakening joy on gets so strengthened. So this notion of courage begins with intention. It's what Shauna talked about in your first session. Courage doesn't appear out of nowhere. It can, but the consistent application of it requires you choosing that you will live courageously. This is not easy. It's not easy, and here's why. Biologically, in terms of evolution, when you go against the grain and you are within a tribe of people and you stand out, kind of like standing on a stage, you are setting yourself up to be lunch for the predator behind you. Every predator looks for the person who is not with the crowd. It's why we have stage fright. It's why I'm nervous right now. It's why we all get nervous when we're ready to take a stand. It's deep, hard wiring. And then to add to that, we're living, I think, during times where a certain kind of conformity to social order is expected. And when people stand up against that social order, there's usually a price to pay. And hopefully each one of us could say, yes, I am ready to pay that price, and I will hold myself accountable because I am awakening joy inside myself. So here's to the gift of courage to work with this part of our emotions that have a tendency toward fear. And we can tilt toward the good. Let's look at this perky little blue thing. Go get 'em. This one's a slippery slope. All of us love that feeling of accomplishment, and yet we are living in times, we were talking about that in our group, relentless restlessness. I'm busy, I'm rushing, I don't have enough time. And this leads to a certain sort of constant driving energy. So on one hand, it's so wonderful to have these goals and pursue them and get stuff done and accomplish stuff. And you're talking about the checklist. We just love having our checklists. Some of you may have color-coded, cross-reference checklists. It's fun. So let me tell you a little story. Stanford students, I think, get into places like higher education institutions of learning where excellence is highly valued because this system is so well honed. These kids know how to focus. They know how to persist. They are so determined going after a goal. I don't think they're any brighter than lots of other kids, but boy, do they have this determination, grit thing down. In one hand, it helped them be very resilient, and then they get in an environment where everybody else is just like them. And what ends up happening is what started off as drive and motivation and go get 'em turns into striving, perfectionism, downward social comparing like this. A lot of you probably recognize this in some of the emerging adults, that's the new phrase, emerging adults, that we see in our lives. What's frightening is it leads to mental health impairment. So what started off as a beautiful strength hits a tipping point, and the striving and the driving become an impairment. Those are students. Let's look at ourselves as in adults. We are concerned with the same thing. We're pushing and we're busy and we love to. Is there anybody here that's not too busy? Other than you who just retired? We are drooling with envy, man. Raise your hand if you don't think you're too busy. Ooh, beautiful. You look at the magic you've created already. This is a big challenge of not being too busy. One of the problems is that we become so egocentric in this me, me, me. I want, I want, I want. I will, I will, I will. That we lose ourselves. We lose connection with our inner knowing. And the antidote and the blessing that I would like to offer you to combat this ego attachment to success and accomplishment and doing is gratitude. This simple act of gratitude. So I like to tell stories, so I hope that you allow me to tell you another story about gratitude. I had a student in my class who was a varsity athlete. He was very combative. I still to this day cannot figure out why he stayed in the class. He just argued about everything. And he was like a striver, a go-getter. He was a very successful varsity athlete. And in the class, there was an assignment. The students needed to look around and notice someone at the campus who will never receive public recognition. The people who mow the lawns, the people who clean the bathrooms, the people who serve food. We are all, most of us, in places where we will be recognized. We may receive an award. These are people who work so hard to make our lives beautiful and aesthetic and sparkle. And so their assignment was, in the study of gratitude, that they needed to approach someone, make real contact with them, and express specifically what they were grateful for. What contribution did this person make to their lives? I love the way the grass smells. Thank you for taking such good care of our beautiful gardens. I love the food. We actually have very good food. Thank you so much. Most of the students were very, very attuned to this, and there was something deep inside of them that sensed this was valuable, except for Joe. He was like, oh. All right, so I was kind of curious and didn't get much from him. The next few classes, we kind of talked about it, and it was lovely to feel their energy. The last session, we always have an open mic. Open-ended, students can come up, say whatever they want. So Joe comes up, he's like a big guy, and he's like, okay, you guys, so here's what happened. And he goes on to say that every morning he needs to be up at 5 a.m. He's the first one up because he has to go to practice. And every morning he goes to the bathroom, and many times one of the housekeepers is in there cleaning the bathroom. And he's like, ugh, and he has to go down the hall and do his business somewhere else. Well, for some reason that morning he woke up and he realized his assignment was late and he better get on it and write it up. So he decided to say something to the housekeeper, and it went something like, yeah, I really want to thank you. It's like really nice, like waking up and the bathroom's all sparkling and clean, like thank you. And he said, she burst out crying. And she said, thank you. I've been here for 15 years, and you are the first person that has ever thanked me. And his parting gesture was, so you guys, thanks for helping me find my sweet side. Joe slowed down. His little varsity athlete, big guy heart slowed down enough to hear his own beat. He slowed down enough to hear the beat of this woman who was his mom's age, maybe his grandma's age. And he was the one who ignited joy in her heart. And it meant a lot to him. Last year I saw him at graduation, and I went over and said hi, asked him if he remembered, and he went like, yeah, I've been passing it on. Yes! So for a moment right now, think of someone who has taken your life and contributed to your life in a way that is so beautiful. Small little jewel that brings radiance, adds sparkle, aesthetic art. And I'm going to ask you to do something. If you have a cell phone, you may not look at the score. We've been given clear instructions. I'm trusting you. If you have a cell phone, you can take it out and do what we call, in our very busy lives, because who has time to keep a gratitude journal? This is an adjunct. Send a gratitext. Think of someone else who has access to an iPhone, an iPad, a computer, a carrier pigeon, whatever, and in a minute, just 1 minute, send a gratitext to that person, expressing your gratitude for what they bring to your life. Notice how it feels, and just wait till you get the response. Go ahead, please. We'll just take a minute to do this. While you're writing, I'm going to talk a little bit. This is a beautiful thing to do in community. It's a wonderful thing to do with your kids. It's a wonderful thing to do with your family and with your friends. You don't have to be doing it to each other, but there's a shared beauty in when you start getting responses. There's something electric about just being together with the beauty of gratitude soaking in the moment. And in order to do this, we need to slow down a little bit. That was my challenge we were talking about, to just slow down and appreciate this amazing world, this beautiful earth, the amazing people that are here, that often we just don't think about how much they contribute to our well-being and the well-being of the earth. You come to a natural conclusion and just drop in for a minute and see, how does this feel? And some of you may be getting pinged, so wait till... It's really fun. So let's come to the last part. Do you remember this? The affiliative. This is the place of wanting to love, wanting to be loved, wanting to care for, and wanting to be cared for. This is the place where we reach out for each other, like little animals do. It's so basic to our nature to want to connect with each other. The hard part with this is that we often want to hear yes, 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 and we hear no, no, no. And life is filled, as we know, the great noble truth, life is filled with suffering. And as bodhisattvas, we are here to do what we can to notice suffering, sit in the other person's shoes with empathy, and when we can, be present or alleviate that suffering. Forgiveness, compassion, grace. This is the gift of grace. I am going to guess that in this beautiful group of people who have awakened joy, compassion is not your challenge. I think that you probably, among people on this earth, are the most inclined to a disposition that's filled with empathy for others and that's filled with compassion for others, that understands suffering is a part of life, and your part in that beautiful circle of life. On the other hand, the challenge is self-compassion. Another one of those lessons, kindness to self. We are so misguided about kindness. We are so misguided. And where it comes from are messages from childhood, religion, culture, art, that somehow to appreciate ourselves is boasting or narcissistic. Where does this come from? There's a wonderful story about the Dalai Lama. He was at an event with a Q&A, and he was with Jinpa. And somebody asked the question, I understand about compassion, but I am so hard on myself. I am so mean the way I talk to myself. I would never speak to a friend or anyone I cared about, or even a stranger. And the Dalai Lama had to ask for translations over and over. It was a construct that was completely unfamiliar to him. It was out of his understanding that a person would be cruel to themselves. Now, maybe this has to do with reincarnation. If you believe that you could have been your beloved ancestor or a beloved hero, you naturally would not be unkind to yourself. I don't know. But I do know this, that by learning to be kind and self-compassionate is a sacred act. It's an act of divinity. Because when we nourish ourselves, we can give more to the world. There's a beautiful Hebrew expression called tikkun hanefesh, which means healing the soul, nourishing the spirit. Tikkun hanefesh we must do because of tikkun alam. When our hearts are nourished and our souls are at peace and we feel contentment and a sense of who I am in presence, we can begin the act of tikkun olam. We can fully step into the circle of life to heal the world. Tikkun olam, to heal the world. Tikkun hanefesh, to heal my soul. A beautiful marriage, a beautiful blessing. May you nourish your soul so we could get out and heal the world. So I am going to ask you to engage, if you will, and invite you to do a little diet exercise. Game? Okay. Please find your partner. And here's the game. This is our Tikkun HaNefesh for tonight. Very simple. There's a listener and a speaker. Speaker, I am going to begin the exercise with the question, please talk about something you appreciate about yourself. Listener, your job is to not be a helper-giver. You're just going to listen. You can nod your head. You're going to listen. And if the person runs out of conversation, you can prompt them with only one sentence, which is, thank you. And what else do you appreciate about yourself? So, do we have like 10 minutes? Okay, so we're going to do this. You're getting off easy. We're only going to do this for 2 minutes. Each. So, the person with the shorter hair, you are going to be the speaker. And the person with the longer hair, you are going to be the listener. Speaker. The challenge is this. This is not what other people appreciate about you. This is what you appreciate about yourself. And listener, if you're a helper-giver type, you're going to be wanting giving all kinds of cues. Don't do that. Just sit, let them find their own inner knowing. Okay, ready? So I'm going to time for 2 minutes, and I'll let you know when 2 minutes are up. Please, begin. What do you appreciate about yourself? And now I invite you to change partners, please. What do you appreciate about yourself? And when you're ready, start coming to a natural stopping point. Finish your sentence. And as you come to stillness, speaker, notice, what did that feel like? To share what you appreciate about yourself. To exchange that harsh inner critic in our own heads for a voice without boasting, just a clear and simple, these are my gifts, and this is what I appreciate, and this is what I can bring into the world to awaken joy in myself and awaken joy in others. It's such a beautiful thing. There's nothing narcissistic. It is a gift, and it is a blessing. Appreciate yourself. I'm going to give you a little assignment. So fun. If you choose to accept this assignment, email, write to, call 8 people that you know, different parts of your life, and have them tell you 3 things that they appreciate about you. You could tell them it's for class you're taking, okay? And enjoy with amazement what you get back. Be amazed to see your own beauty in the eyes of others and breathe it in, let it in deeply. This is beautiful nourishment. And so, in closing of this amazing experience, take these risks, gumption, gratitude, grace, to step out of your comfort zone. Maybe your comfort zone is calling to you to maybe help the vulnerable, or create some amazing new product, or get involved with volunteer work, or help the earth. Whatever it is that's calling to you, listen to that call. Cultivate courage to act despite fear. Cultivate gratitude to counteract the busy, hectic, crazy go, 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 go. And above all, cultivate appreciation for the beauty that you are so that you can turn around and contribute to the world. And as you leave Awakening Joy, may you take these beautiful practices with you. May your home practice, hopefully with a joy buddy, continue to be bright and radiant and guide you always on your path. And may you always be blessed with awakening joy. Thank you.